Today I'll be showing you why the popular $1 million Save for Retirement rule is misleading and what you really need to retire comfortably in 2025. Over the years, I've discovered the actual number needed to retire is often significantly different from this arbitrary $1 million target, or frankly, any other savings number or rule of thumb target that you've heard about. That's exactly why I'm making this video today, to show you the real number you need to retire in 2025 and why it might be much more attainable than you think. So let's get right into it. In today's video, I'm going to go into some more detail around spending in retirement and helping you to figure out how much you need to have saved, or frankly, be able to evaluate when it is that you're going to be able to retire. So I did some research to find some updated numbers, wanted to find some good data on this to go along with just my experience helping retirees. So over the last 10 plus years, almost all of my experience has been working with people who are about to retire or who are in retirement. So I've got my own experience of seeing, hundreds of people, as well as teaching courses and doing videos online, interacting with a lot of people. I have my own sense of these things, right? But I'm just one person. And although I have more experience in this than your typical person, I wanted to kind of broaden my scope and see what good research is out there to help kind of inform this video that I'm making. So the point that I want to get across is, before you can get to, trying to figure out, what is the right number that you need, this rule of thumb, what I want to convince you today is that you don't need a retirement number. What you need is a retirement plan. And ultimately, after you have a plan and you understand the specifics of your situation that are going to impact your spending, then ultimately, yes, you'll probably arrive at, some number that can kind of, help as kind of a North Star for you. But just starting from the get-go saying, oh, I need $1 million, or I need $2 million or $5 million it's not going to be the right answer. So number one, in my video last week, I discussed some specifics around spending in retirement and some great research that outlines that for most people on an inflation adjusted basis, kind of regardless of wealth level, whether you're kind of like you've got a few $100,000 saved or a few million saved for retirement, that for most people, your spending kind of peaks early in retirement, and then on an inflation adjusted basis, it kind of goes down over time. Obviously, there's exceptions, but that's kind of on average. That's what the data shows. So what I want to do in this video is go into some more information to kind of help you refine your planning and help you understand what are some of the variables that a financial planner would look at in helping you figure out how much money you need saved. So these are the type of things that I consider when I'm working with people. And so I'm just going to kind of, share some of these insights that I have, and I think it'll be helpful. So the first thing that I want to discuss today is the importance of housing expense. In the research we looked at last week, the studies by JP Morgan, housing was the number one expense for retirees from the beginning all the way through the end of retirement. And what I found is that it was interesting that on average, that housing expense remained kind of this constant large percentage of somebody's retirees' monthly spending. However, in my experience, I found that to be not necessarily the case. So it's often the case that when somebody has saved up, a good chunk of money for retirement, they also often own a home, and they're either, paying down a mortgage on it or they have it paid off. In either one of those cases, it's been my experience that as a percentage of a retiree's overall spending, that housing expense actually goes down over time. And often it goes down to just almost nothing, especially if you have a paid off home. So first, I'm going to pull up on the screen here. I've got some research from the Employee Benefit Research Institute. Basically, what they did in a study from 2022 is they confirmed what I found in the other research, which is that about 30 to 39% of your typical retiree spending goes towards housing. What I wanted to do is try and model out and show the impact of having either a paid off home, or if you own a home and you have a mortgage on it, where in that case, your monthly payment is relatively constant. Obviously, there's going to be differences with, if your property taxes change over time, or, cost of insurance, which are real. But your principal and interest payments, assuming a fixed rate mortgage, your principal and interest payment is going to remain constant over time. So let's take a look at that. So in the research, both from last week and what I looked up this week, was showing that housing expense makes up about somewhere between 30 to 40% for your typical retiree. So what I did is I wanted to model out and show how things would change over time if you just had a fixed rate mortgage. So let's say in year one, we've got an early retiree retiring at age 55. Their total monthly expenses in retirement are $5,000 a month. Okay, well, 35% of that is going to be $1,750, so that's going to equal the housing expense to begin with, right? So let's look at overtime as somebody's monthly expenses go up over time with a fixed housing expense. What is the percentage of your housing expense? How does that change over time? So anyway, you can see that initially, right, 35%. But then with each year that passes by, so what I'm assuming here is a 3% cost of living adjustment. Your monthly living expenses are going up, but relatively speaking, with a fixed rate mortgage and a level housing expense, the percentage of your monthly expenses that are occupied or taken up by housing are going down. So already from 55 down to 65, we've dropped by 9%. And so as we go down over time, I'll take that off. We scroll down all the way here to the end. By age 90, now let's assume a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. They wouldn't have a mortgage at this point, but just to kind of model it out all the way. That fixed housing expense, starting out at 35% now is only equal to about 12% of their budget. So you can see that over time, if this is the case for you, you have this powerful, advantage in retirement where, yes, things go up typically over time, the cost of things. But if you have a fixed rate mortgage or you have a paid off home, this is a huge advantage that you have of controlling your expenses. And frankly, just on an inflation adjusted basis, this is one aspect of your budget that's going to become more affordable over time. So over here in the far right column, what I wanted to do is kind of look at, as this percentage of your budget line item goes down, how much kind of additional discretionary income do you have on a monthly basis? So you can see that over time, as it's going down, this is showing, this column here, column K, is showing how your kind of the additional monthly discretionary income you have available to you as your housing expense becomes a smaller and smaller percentage of your overall budget. So that's just a helpful piece of information as you're planning out your retirement and you're trying to model out, okay, how are my expenses going to change over time? This is one variable that you might have more control over than you think. And this acts as, kind of like a tailwind, a very positive, just a solid positive foundation to your retirement plan. Now, the next expense that I want to go over and what I'll finish out this video on is the impact of different costs from a state to state level. So if you read things online, it'll, like I've talked about, kind of these national averages for spending, how much you need. Well, it turns out, as you may have suspected already, that based on where you live, what state you live in, there's a drastic impact on your expenses. So there's kind of two categories here. So let's look at just kind of overall the tax burden for every state where you live. And then secondarily would just be kind of other, general cost of living, aside from overall tax burden. So in this video, we're going to look at overall tax burden. And when you look at taxes in retirement, there's a lot of things to consider. What I did is I did an analysis of all 50 states looking at the total tax burden as a percentage of your income. What that looks like from state to state. So, famously, some states have no income tax. Well, those states don't just run on, unicorns and, and good vibes, right? Each state needs revenue somehow. So you have property taxes or different sales taxes or, local, county taxes or city taxes. So what I did is looked at the total tax burden on a state by state level. And we can look at that to kind of gauge the impact that would have on your overall expenses once you're in retirement. So let's jump over to the chart that I put together and see what that looks like. All right, so here we're looking at total tax burden as a percentage of income on a state-by-state basis. So over here on the left, the y-axis, you can see this is the percentage here. And along the bottom is every state. So I've lined them up, percentage of highest tax burden to the lowest tax burden. So pretty intuitive here, although there's probably no surprise. New York, Hawaii, California, Connecticut, these are, on the higher end of total tax burden as a percentage of income. And on the far right, New Hampshire, Wyoming, Florida, Alaska, Tennessee, these are ones that you've probably expected. A little bit of a surprise for a lot of people would be, like for me, here in the state of Utah, we're kind of up at the upper end of total tax burden for retirees, definitely on the higher end. So when it comes to looking at your expenses in retirement, a lot of people end up moving once they retire, relocating, to be in your family. You want to be by your kids or, wherever they relocate, if they leave the state, they leave home for work or for school or whatever. And so as you're thinking about your expenses in retirement, looking at the tax impact of where you're going to live can have a lot of advantages. First of all, number one, you can just have, a realistic idea about how your expenses are going to be different. Now, the next layer is there's a lot of planning opportunities that can happen based on state taxes. So when you're considering things like healthcare and early retirement, or whether or not you should do Roth conversions, for example, or recognizing or not recognizing capital gains from a taxable investment portfolio, understanding how each of these items are treated from a state-by-state basis can save you a lot of money, or at a minimum help you plan ahead and make the best planning decisions possible. Famously, we have one federal income tax code applies to everybody, but on a state-by-state basis, depending on where you live, your state of residence, there's a lot of flexibility, and you could pay a lot more or a lot less in retirement based on where you live. So I hope this is helpful, looking at two different aspects that take, just throwing out a number like, oh, you need $1 million or $2 million to retire is really it's kind of a wacky thing to do. It doesn't account for so much that's going to be so unique to your situation. Hopefully this is helpful, looking at how expenses change over time as it relates to housing, and seeing how your expenses can be so different, drastically different on a state-by-state basis. Hopefully this gives you some additional insight to just illustrate why throwing out some random number like having $1 million or 2 or 5 or whatever is not a very useful exercise. First, you need to begin with understanding your specific information. When do you want to retire? How much do you already have saved? What is the composition, or what is your savings made up of? Pre-tax, after-tax, Roth money? Do you have other income sources? Are you married? Are you single? Do you expect an inheritance, or do you not? Do you have children? Do you plan on moving from one state to another, or is there a reasonable expectation that could happen? What else do we have here? Do you have health care from a former employer? Do you have real estate or not? So these are all just kind of relevant variables that are going to significantly impact how much you need to have saved or don't need to have saved. So first, you start with the plan, understanding your unique situation, and then you probably can arrive at some retirement number to kind of help you target in your final stretch towards retirement. So hopefully this is helpful, gave you some good information as you plan for the next phase of life. So now that you've seen why the $1 million retirement myth needs updating for 2025, I don't want you to walk away from this video with any unanswered questions. That's exactly why I want to offer you the chance to book a complimentary call where I'll sit down with you, look at your exact situation, and help you come up with a game plan to achieve your dream retirement. Just click the link below to book, and I will see you in the next one.